Crane, Vice Mayor of Carefree. And as we get started, we have ice cold water in the red tubs on both sides, and the restrooms are in the back. So through the course of the past 80 years in the United States, there's probably been 3 events that have occurred that, if you were alive at the time, that you remember. You remember what you were doing and where you were when you learned of the event. Pearl Harbor, if you're my age, the assassination of President Kennedy. And if you're a bit older than 20 years old, 9/11. So our guest speaker tonight, Bob Jenkins, has memories of 9/11 that are seared in his mind. He's going to share those with us tonight. So Bob is a resident of Carefree. He runs a contracting business here in town called Vetsville, so you may have seen his trucks driving around. He's a 4-year veteran of the United States Marine Corps, a graduate of Northeastern University. And on the morning of September 11th, 2001, he was on the 39th floor of the World Trade Center in the North Tower. So we're honored to have Bob with us here tonight. So please welcome Bob Jenkins.
Not sure. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
First thing I'd like to ask is everybody to stand, please, and pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I think the first question people ask me or say to me all the time is, Bob, oh, you're so lucky. And the point that I've learned over the past 18 years is, yeah, I'm lucky. I got out of there alive, and I saw people that weren't quite that lucky that day. But by a show of hands, I'd like everybody, just show me. Has anybody ever been on an airplane in this room? Most of everybody. Has anybody ever been in New York in this room?
Good there.
A couple people. So the answer is, you were there, you just weren't there that day. You understand what I mean by that? You just happened to not be there that day, but you've been on an airplane, you've been in New York. So the point is you could have just as easily been there that day. So when people say, I'm lucky, yeah, I am. And so are you, because they tried to kill all of us. Whoever was in the building that day, they tried to kill all of us. Not Bob Jenkins, not the people that were there, every single one of you. Because had you been there, you may not have been so lucky and you wouldn't be sitting here today. And that's the point I try to make here. They look at me and go, oh, you're so lucky. I said, no, you don't understand. You're lucky. We're all lucky that we weren't there that day. But they tried to kill every one of us. And that's the point I try to make with that. So, that said, why was I there? Well, the day before, on 9/10, I was at the New York Stock Exchange. I used to sell video teleconferencing equipment. And on 9/10, I was with my sales manager, David Moss, and my sales engineer, Chris Platt. And we were down talking to the NICE. And it was a brutal, hot, humid day. And I don't know, the only thing probably worse than being in New York City on a hot, humid day is maybe New Orleans. But at the end of the day, David lived in New Jersey. Chris was from Chicago, I was from Boston. And so at the end of the day, David went back to Jersey, and Chris and I went uptown. We were going to Midtown. We went to the Marriott Marquis. We stayed there. We went out for some sushi. We had a couple beers that night. We were going to get up the next morning and head back downtown to go to the World Trade Center to go Lehman Brothers. The reason we were doing that was Lehman Brothers had a very stringent requirement that they wanted for desktop video conferencing. And I worked for a very small video conferencing company, but we had done everything that they wanted to do. And I was one of the cockiest salesmen on the planet because I knew walking into this that we had everything that they needed nailed. And things that they didn't even know they needed, we had nailed as well. So we had it completely under control. So the following morning, Chris I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps, so I do get up early. And I understand discipline and structure and all that kind of good stuff. I was looking for you. Russ? Okay. So we got up early, and Chris was usually a little bit late. So we got up early, and we went outside and picked a cab up. And it was a beautiful fall day. Dry, cool, crisp, clean. The antithesis of the day before, hot and humid. This was one of those days you wake up and you just breathe air and you go, it's great to be alive. So we took a cab downtown. We went down the FDR Drive, and we got down to the World Trade Center. We got out of the cab, we had our overnight bags, we had our laptop computers, we were going to go into the building, we were going to make a presentation. I was supposed to go to Canada, Montreal or Toronto that night. So we got out, we went into the building, we got a cup of coffee, and we're early. So Chris and I are standing there, we're drinking a cup of coffee, and we're watching all of these people. And at the elevator banks, and it was like time-lapse photography. You know, you'd see these big lines of people, and then in, and then big lines of people, and then in, and in. And I remember looking at Chris, and I grew up in and around New York. It's not like I'm a stranger. And I looked at Chris at one point, and I said, where the hell are they all going? You know, like, how big is this building? And David showed up, our VP of Sales, and Arthur Cass was a consultant that we had. And they showed up, and we got, I'm sorry, this is what I meant to show. The other people coming in from the PATH train, so these people coming into these lines for the elevators. So David and Arthur showed up. The four of us are now there. We go through security. And we had to have these security badges. You know, where's the irony in that? So we got our security badges. You'll notice mine says 40. Well, we went up to the 40th floor. We met the people from Lehman Brothers. And then we walked down a flight of stairs to the 39th floor to go to the conference room that we had reserved. So we walk into a conference room, and this is like any other conference room on the planet, basically. And we did what everybody does. You know, how was your summer? How the kids? How's this? All the pleasantries out of the way. And we get all that done, and now it's about 8:30-ish. And I get to the point where I go, okay, this is my account, and I say, all right, folks, the purpose of the meeting, we are here to discuss. And I think the word discuss got about 8 inches out of my mouth when all of a sudden there was an explosion. And I was a combat engineer in the Marine Corps for 4 years. That doesn't mean much to most people. But my job was primarily mines, demolitions, booby traps, dirty trick devices, and construction. I blew a lot of stuff up in 4 years. I know what high explosives do. I know what explosives look like. I know what they sound like. I know what they feel like. Everything about them, I got. And it's still indelibly ingrained in me and will be till the day I die. So we're sitting around a conference table, and all of a sudden, what you all saw, we felt. And the first thing was the explosion went off, but then I felt the percussion come down through the building. And as I felt the percussion come down through the building, everything went silent. Every time stopped. And then, what most people don't realize is the building started to convulse wildly. And so think of a very tall building, and it starts doing this. And it's rocking back and forth, and convulsing. So, these guys, you can see the panic in their eyes. They lit up like Christmas trees. I had actually taken a course in the Marine Corps that taught us how not to panic. It was in the water, and they tried to drown us, and what it taught us was how not to panic, because panic is what kills people. And so the first thing I'm doing is sitting there going, Bob, you're in a tall building in Lower Manhattan. It's not an earthquake. There's been an explosion, and I'm trying to put the pieces together. In the meantime, these guys are wanting to get up to run out of the building. And when I say run out of the building, it's not like if something happened in this room, you ran out on this floor. It was like running on jello. So it was really difficult to move and walk. But they all managed to get up and get out of the room, and they were heading to the stairway. I've got a construction background. In my head, I'm picturing a building that's going like this. Stairways, I'm thinking, could drop, potentially, the way that they're pinned and put together. I'm thinking the stairways are going to come down. So I don't want to get strapped in a stairway. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's happened here. I'm going to sit here and give this a moment to figure out what I'm going to do next. I know it's not an earthquake. Earthquakes don't explode. Getting under the door jamb, all the things that we've learned about earthquakes, so I'm thinking that all through, going, that's not going to work. So I watch these guys get up and leave, and the building's convulsing, chairs are falling, computers are coming off of desks. It's just pure mayhem on the floor. And I managed to get out of this conference room, and I kind of, not crawl, but I get my way over to the windows. And I'm now looking out like this view. I'm standing looking out the windows, and I'm staring at the Statue of Liberty, and I'm looking down, and this is the view that I have. That, again, is indelibly etched in my mind. So I look down at the Statue of Liberty, and from the reverse angle, I'm on the 39th floor of the Trade Center, and that's the view that I'm looking at. And it was a day like that. I mean, it was crystal clear. It was beautiful. I look down, I look at the Statue of Liberty, I look at the piers down below, the Hudson River's right there, I'm looking at the piers across, I see the Palisades Cliffs in front of me. It was such a clear day, I could almost see Chicago. And then I looked up here, and it was a cobalt blue sky, and coming down like snowflakes, like ticker tape, white against that cobalt blue sky. And it was like snowflakes. It was beautiful. And I remember looking up, and I said out loud, I said, God, it's beautiful. And I'm watching the building just swaying back and forth violently. And I literally put my hands in my pockets. And I stood there like this, and I looked down at the piers, right down there. Statue of Liberty's right there. And I looked, and I just smiled. And I went, so this is where I die. And I knew for sure that the next thing that was going to happen was that building was going to topple over, and there wasn't a damn thing I was going to do about it. And that's where I was going to die. We're all going to go someday, and nobody knows exactly when. But boy, I'll tell you, I knew for sure that was it. I had, it's a feeling I can't describe. It's between me and the Lord, because I was completely at peace. I had no worries, I had no pain, there was nothing other than utter peace. I'm like, okay, this is where it's going to happen. So, a moment later, the building stopped convulsing. And I thought, that's a really good sign. And then I heard, that's when I heard a woman yell, there's been an explosion in the mechanical room on the 42nd floor. And I thought, okay, so this is 3 stories above me. The building stopped shaking. Now I can get out of here. So I was supposed to go to Toronto that night. Like I said, I had my overnight bag in the conference room. My laptop was in the conference room. And I had a notebook. And I mean the old-fashioned notebook where you actually wrote with a pen and paper. And that was the only thing I had in my hand. And I said, I'll come back and get my overnight bag and computer later. And I went to the stairway. And I walked over to the stairway, and I opened the door. And as I opened the door, that's what I saw. And I literally did a double take. I closed the door and I opened it again, and I thought, where did all these people come from? Well, this wasn't their first rodeo. These are people who lived and worked in Manhattan, and that's a different breed of cat in a good day. And they had been through the 80, what year was it? 80, 86? 93. So they weren't going to play around and wait. So the point is I got in the stairway, and I just walked into this mass of humanity. And as I'm walking down the stairs, just one step at a time, and I've measured it numerous times since then. If any one of you were to go to a stairwell right now and walk down, you'll do it in about 5, maybe 6 seconds. Depends how quickly you want to do it, but I mean, just walk down flights there. 5 or 6 seconds. Do the math. It took me 40 minutes to get out of the building. I was on the 39th floor, so you can kind of do the math. I was a little over a minute per floor, basically. A minute to walk down a flight of stairs is forever. So, walking down the stairs, And that's basically what the fire stairs look like. People ask me all the time, as I'm coming down the stairs, Bob, did you know that another plane hit the building? And the answer is, I didn't even know the first plane hit the building. So the answer is no. We had no idea. We didn't see anything. We didn't feel anything. We had no idea that another plane had hit while we were coming down the stairwell. So that said, as I get to the 30th floor and I'm coming down those stairs, I look over and I hear some commotion. And so I look over and I see these two guys running up against traffic. And my first thought, having been in and around New York, these are a couple of really high-powered Goldman Sachs traders. These are the guys that trade millions of dollars a day, and they're going back up to their desks. First thought that crossed my mind. Yep, doesn't surprise me in New York. So I get down to the 30th floor, and as I get down there, and I start to pivot, and I do mean right there. I start to pivot, and as I start to pivot, the firefighter that came up, they both had jackets and ties on, suits, jackets and ties, and as I started to pivot to come down, he came up, and we literally did this. I went here, he came up, and we bumped into each other, and right here, he had a badge. And it said Chief, New York City Fire Department. The guy directly behind him had a badge, Lieutenant, New York City Fire Department. And I mean, it was this close to my face when I saw them both. So they both had climbed the stairway to heaven because they both died that day. The other point is that these weren't kids. So these two men were not in the lobby having coffee. They came from somewhere in Manhattan, got in that building and climbed 30 flights of stairs by the time I went down 9 flights of stairs against the flow of traffic. That's how determined they were. So that said, I pass them, I keep walking down. As I'm walking down, I don't remember what floor it was on, but I came down, I pivoted, and I'm now looking at the stairway, the platform directly in front of me, and there was a bottleneck. And people would ask, oh, there must have been crazy pandemonium, people were screaming and yelling, there must have been complete chaos in the stairway. And the answer was no, the complete opposite. People were really well behaved. You know, New York gets a bad attitude or a bad rap once in a while. I got to tell you, having been through a few things in New York and lived and brought up in New York my whole life, New Yorkers are great people. Yeah. And really, because what happened here was the people that couldn't see what was going on, there was a bottleneck. So all of a sudden you'd hear just that sub-panic in people's voices going, what's wrong? Why are we slowing up? What's the problem? Why are we slowing up? And immediately you'd hear people say, there's a man in a wheelchair, there's a little bit of a bottleneck, show respect. And you'd hear that reverberate back up through the stairs. And then people were okay with that. So we got by him, but as I'm walking down and I'm looking at this guy, I'm step. I'm looking and I'm thinking, well, maybe I can pick this guy up and put him on my back. Step. Bob, you're not a 22-year-old Marine anymore. Step. Well, maybe we get a couple people and pick him up in the wheelchair and carry him down. Step. No, it's not going to work. So I'm getting closer to him, and then I think, you know what? This is what the fire department's trained for. This is what the fire department does. This isn't my job. And again, 42nd floor, mechanical room. There's nothing about a jet. I have no idea what's really going on here. So as I get to this guy, I pivot, turn, and walk past him, and I walk down. Well, of course, he perished. So as I'm continuing to walk down the stairs, anybody who saw any of this, what happened was, because the building's the way it was a big funnel, and it created a chimney, and the stairs started filling up with smoke. And my last year in the Marine Corps, I was stationed in Iwakuni, Japan, and so I smelled jet fuel every day of my life. It was Marine Corps Air Station, Iwakuni. I smelled jet fuel every single day of my life. Russ, you know what that smells like. Russ is a pilot for United Airlines. He's also a retired Top Gun fighter and a pilot for United for, what, 35 years?
I was captain with Pan American World Airways for 20 years, and then Pan Am sold its Pacific division to United for $750 million. 430 Pan Am pilots went to United. I was one of the 430.
He's flown airplanes. He's flown airplanes.
I was pilot in command of both the two United aircraft which were involved in 9/11.
And if you ever want to hear another story off the record here, he's got some things that'll curl your toes. But that's another story. So, I'm now smelling smoke. And the smoke is getting heavier and thicker. And I'm starting to think, okay, we're going to asphyxiate in these stairs. We're going to die of smoke inhalation, and we're going to asphyxiate in these stairs. And every time I get down to a floor, I'm reaching over for that handle. But they're all locked for security purposes, so you can't go from floor to floor to floor. They're all locked. Makes sense? Except for if you want to get out of the stairs. So as I'm walking down those stairs, and this is what I was talking about earlier, people were handing out handkerchiefs, napkins, anything that they had extra. People were handing out things like this. And that's all you saw, with people holding this over their face walking down the stairs, trying to breathe, not breathe the smoke. I mean, so here we go down the stairs, we're doing this. And again, people handing things out. I don't remember what floor it was, but I got down to one of the landings, and again, as I hit that landing, I started to pivot, the door opened. And as that door opened, two guys walked in right in front of me. They had dark pants on, white shirts, they had ties on, the ties were unbuttoned down to here. I can still picture them perfectly. I grabbed that door handle and I walked right into that office, like I'm in here with you. And I walked in and I went, hallelujah, I got clean, fresh air. And so now I'm standing in here and I'm cleaning out my eyes and I'm hyperventilating and I'm thinking, this is a good thing. I'm going to kill an hour. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to kill an hour. I got to go back upstairs and go get my overnight bag, my computer. I got to go back upstairs. So I could sit here, let the fire department do what they're going to do on the 42nd floor because of this thing. And that's what I'm going to do. Guess what I didn't do? So, call it divine intervention. But I do believe that the Lord Jesus Christ put his hand on my shoulder that day and said, Bob, you need to come with me. Because we as human beings will not put ourselves in peril intentionally. It's just not in our DNA. There are risk takers, there are thrill seekers that do it all day long, but we are not programmed to intentionally put ourselves in risk. And I knew damn well that those stairs were full of smoke, and I thought for sure we were going to die of smoke inhalation in there. And I still walked back out to that stairway. I opened the door, and the people were coming down. And I reached over, and I looked down. I stopped all the traffic, and I looked. I couldn't see anything because of the smoke, but I was listening, and I was waiting for somebody to say, get back up, get back up. And then I was going to go back in the room. And I said, Bob, you're about to make a life or death decision. And I really didn't want to go that way. I knew I had clean, fresh air right here. And I involuntarily let go of that handle. And that's the reason you're sitting here right now. Because had I stayed, you'd be out having dinner at Harold's, or you'd be out doing something right now, but you wouldn't be in this room, I can promise you. Because I would have been killed that day. So I got back in the stairs and I kept walking down, and now I'm like, you know, wrong decision, but you know, what are you going to do? It's like jumping out of an airplane, you know, once you're there, there's no turning back. So I keep walking down the stairs, and at one point, directly in front of me, there was a woman who stood about 5 foot nothing and had to weigh about 250 pounds, and she was coming down. What people don't understand, walking downstairs is hard. You know, it's tough on your quads. And so here she was, and she's walking down, and she's stopping, and she's taking a step, and she's stopping, and she's taking a step, and she's stopping. And the same thing with the guy in the wheelchair, created a bottleneck. And so people that couldn't see what was going on, when you got to her, it created a bottleneck. And people were like, what's wrong? Why are we stopping? Why are we slowing down? What's the problem? And people would again say, there's a woman having some problem here in the stairs, show some respect, and you'd hear that go back up the stairs. And people would then come around her. So, when you're walking down, anybody's ever walked down a flight of stairs, you know you've got, on every floor, there's a number. It tells you what floor you're on. I cannot even begin to tell you that I was looking at, 20. Bob, you got a long way to go. 18, you still got a long way to go. 16, 12. Okay, you're getting awful close. In the meantime, you can't see and you can't breathe. The other thing that happened was that when the planes went in and hit the building, they severed all those water lines up high. So now we had water cascading down with jet fuel mixed in with it, and it was cascading down on top of it. So we had water with jet fuel mixed in it, and smoke in the stairs, and it was pretty miserable walking down. Couldn't see, couldn't breathe. So as I'm coming down, I'm looking at all these numbers on the stairway. All I'm thinking was, close doesn't count. You know, we're almost there, but close just doesn't count. And you're just willing everybody in front of you, hurry up. I mean, you're standing like when you're stuck in traffic, you know, and you got to pee. What are you doing? Hurry up, let's go, let's go. Come on, goddamn it. You'll move the car. And you're looking at all these people in front of you, and they're not going anywhere. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, close only counts in horseshoes, hand grenades, and atomic bombs. You know, doesn't count. I'm thinking I could jump out a window from one of these floors and probably break my legs, but at least I'd land and I'd be okay. And it ain't happening. So I remember walking down, as we got down, I came around one more corner, and it was 2. And I came down to 1, and I was at the mezzanine level. And as soon as I came around that corner, there was a security guard at the bottom of the stairs. And he's down there just going like this. And I looked at him, and I looked at the door open, and I thought, hot damn, I just bought a floor. I'm out of here. So I came out, and where I walked out was at the top of that escalator. And I know that for a fact because I used to work for American Express. I knew exactly where I was. So I walked out. If you went to the top of that escalator, walked about 15, 20 feet, that's where that door opened. And that's right where I was. So I'm walking out, and again, I'm now out, clear, okay. 42nd floor, mechanical room. I have no idea a jet hit the building. I walk about 15 or 20 feet, and to my right, out lying on the ground, is a smoldering jet engine and part of a wing to an airplane. I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps. I've done some crazy things. I've seen some crazy things. I've been through some crazy things. But I can promise you that as a civilian, when you're at the base of the World Trade Center, and you're in lower Manhattan, and you see a jet engine lying on the ground, you can't put those pieces together. It just doesn't fit. And I'm looking, going, what in the name of God am I looking at? There's a smoldering jet engine right there. And I'm watching people run past me and run past me. And we got these big glass walls. So I'm still thinking nothing to panic about, but I have no idea what that's going on. Although I know something's, you know, clearly very wrong. And as I watch these people run past me down to the end of this corridor, they'd come to these big glass doors, and they did this. They'd run up to the door, they'd grab the handles, they'd open the door, and they'd look up. And I'm thinking, what are they looking for? Don't know, but that's what they were doing. So I'm walking down, I get to the door, I open the door, and of course I look up. Didn't see anything. But from the side of the building, and I don't know how far it was, you know, pick a number. It'll work. 20 yards, 10 yards, doesn't matter. You know, from here to that wall maybe, I don't remember. But there was nothing, and then there was just this massive humanity. And I mean massive humanity. It looked like that. And I could have gone one of a gazillion directions, but somehow, by the grace of God, I happened to see Arthur. Arthur was very tall, and he had really curly hair. And out of this whole sea of humans, I happened to see his head. And I yelled, Arthur, as loudly as I could. And I saw him bouncing around like a ferret. I put a bead on him, and I got into him in the crowd. And he looked at me and said, have you seen David and Chris, my VP of sales and my engineer? I said, no, I haven't seen them. He said, Bob, don't move. They're not leaving without you. Which is really powerful. Because had I not seen him and gone one of any other direction, who knows what could have happened next. Because what did happen next, they asked me what was going on in the building. I said, look, I was the last guy out of there. I know for a fact I was. So I said, all the other people in that conference room are out. Where they are at this moment, I have no idea, but I know they're out of the building. So presumably they're safe. Okay, we get that covered. So now we do what everybody else on the planet's doing. We're standing there, we're looking at this. And I'm looking up and I'm going, how the hell are they ever going to fix that? You know, are they going to take the scaffoldings from down below, or are they going to bring them from the top? And I'm like, how are they ever going to fix that? And I'm thinking of it, you know, from a construction point of view. And then I hear someone in the crowd yell, oh my God, someone jumped. And I went, no, I think that's just debris falling. And at that moment, I saw a man stand at the top of the World Trade Center, and he just stepped off the edge of the building. He just walked off, just walked right off. He's coming down, and I'm standing there involuntarily going, pull the chute, pull the chute, pull the chute, pull the chute, pull the chute. I'm thinking this is some movie. I'm thinking this is a base jumper. I'm thinking anything but someone's jumping off the top of the World Trade Center without a parachute. And that wasn't the case, because when he hit the ground, he turned into a tomato. And a moment later, I saw a woman just step off the edge of the building, just walked right off like she was catching a cab. And she came down, ass over tea kettle, and when she hit the ground, she just turned into a tomato as well. And at that moment, I looked around at all these people, and I have a fairly loud voice, and I said, folks, this is not live entertainment, and I will not stand here and watch people commit suicide. I'm getting the hell out of here. And at that moment, I looked at Arthur and said, let's go. David looked at me. David lived in New Jersey. Chris was from Chicago. Arthur was from New York, and I was going to go to Boston. David looks at me, and he goes, you have to know and understand this, but he looked at me, and he tried to pull a power play. He goes, Bob, you're going with me. We're doing this. And I looked at him, David, I stopped taking orders when I got out of the Marine Corps. You know, you're not telling me where to go. So he and Chris ended up taking, and you've heard about those shuttles, all the ferries and all the boats that picked up all those people. They say it was the largest aquatic rescue in the history of the United States. Well, they ended up down there, and they ended up getting one over, I don't know where, I assume New Jersey, wherever. But they did that. Arthur and I ended up walking uptown, which is again why I'm standing here today. We didn't stand there when the buildings collapsed. So here we are, down here at the World Trade Center. And Arthur and I start walking uptown. So we walk up past Chambers Street, through Tribeca, Soho, Greenwich Village, and we're walking uptown. And as we're walking uptown, there's a lot going on. And we bumped into a guy on the street. People had doors open, there were radios, people listened to the news. And we bumped into a guy on the street, and you got to keep in mind too, telephones were not working. When you tried to call somebody, everybody in the world was using a telephone. So you might get through for a few seconds, and then the phones were going dead. So I was trying to call my family and my ex-wife to tell them that I had gotten out of the building, and it connected, and then it went dead, which is a bigger problem, because now they're like, Bob just called, and guess what? The phone went dead. So they're watching the news, I can't make a phone call. Now they have me at the base of the building and the phone goes dead. Not so bueno. So we bump into a guy on the street and we're talking to him, and he said, I've got a place right here. If you want to go up into my flat, my brownstone, maybe make a phone call, what have you. So I said, all right, I'm going to do it. And this is pretty funny. You'll appreciate this. We walk a couple steps up his brownstone. He puts the key in the lock. He starts to open the door. And I can't make this up. He looks at me and he goes, you're not going to rob me, are you? And I said, yeah, somehow I figured out how to get these airplanes to the World Trade Center, to do all this, hoping some guy in Soho is going to open his door and let me in so I can rob it. And he looks at me and goes, I'm such a New Yorker, aren't I? And I said, yeah, you are. Yeah. And so we got in his place, and at that point I realized I was parched. I was absolutely parched. I remember drinking this big cup of water and just sucking down a cup of water. And I made a phone call, and the news was on. Arthur would not come in the building. Keep in mind, because it's funny what happened a few minutes later. Arthur's like, I'm not going into a building. He sat outside. I go inside, I get the water, watch the news for a moment, try to make a phone call, then I come back out, I meet Arthur, and we're walking uptown, because his wife works up by the Empire State Building. She's up around 42nd Street.
34th.
Where?
34th.
34th? So we're walking uptown to her place. So that's where we were, and that's where we're going, up to 34th Street. And we did notice at one point, Building 2 came down, and we saw some of the dust and the debris, but that didn't really smother us. You know, we saw it, but we didn't know what it was, so we had no idea Building 2 had collapsed yet. We're walking uptown, and we're hearing people talking, radios, that there's been something happened to the Pentagon. Something happened, another plane went down, but nobody's got any real information. Remember somebody saying there was something about a helicopter hitting the Pentagon, but we don't have any real information in that. So we're walking uptown, and we're trying to get uptown to his wife's place. I remember going past the Holland Tunnel, and they had Manhattan completely locked down. You couldn't get in, you couldn't get out. You were going nowhere. They locked down Manhattan. So we're walking up, and we finally get to his wife's building. Now the shoe's on the other foot. I look at Arthur and I say, there's not a chance in hell I'm going up into a tall building near the Empire State Building. Not going to happen. And he's going, come on, Bob, come on, come on. Well, I did. And despite my better judgment, but when we got up in the building, the doors, the elevator door opened, there was a glass door right in front of us. And that was our view. I think we were on the other side of the Empire State Building, as I recall. But that was our view. And I remember seeing Tower 1 still there, but there was just smoke. And I remember saying to one of the folks, where's Tower 2? And the guy looked at me and said, it fell, it's not there anymore. And I said, it was just there, we were just there, it's gotta be. He said, no, it just collapsed. And I thought, that's impossible. So Arthur's wife, all our families knew we were in New York, they knew we were flying, they knew we had meetings. No one in my family knew I was in the World Trade Center that day. Arthur's wife not only knew he was in the World Trade Center, that's her view of what's going on. And then she sees the tower fall, and of course she hasn't spoken to him, so she's thinking the worst. I've seen people pass out when I was stationed in 29 Palms, California from heat exhaustion, but I've never seen anybody just pass out from shock. She turned around and he walked in the door, and literally she just dropped. She literally just dropped. I've never seen it. I thought it was in the movies. I didn't think it could really happen. She just passed out and went out. We got her up. We're all talking. We decided what we're going to do. We're using landlines now. So I called my ex-wife in Boston. I spoke to my son. And I remember saying to my son, Will, the world has changed today. It'll never be the same. Anything you think happened before now is forever gone. And one of the folks that we were in that office building with had a condo or knew somebody up in the 90s, and we were going to try to go uptown to at least be in an apartment to sit this thing out until we could get off the island. Makes sense. So we got out of the building, and we're trying to go uptown. And they had a car, and we're trying to go up Park Avenue. Well, Park Avenue was gridlock. I mean, you couldn't get on the island, you couldn't get off, so it was just gridlock. So at one point, we're listening to 1010 Winds radio, listening to the news, and they said Grand Central Station is open. The trains, the New Haven line is open. So I jumped out of the car and I ran down Park Avenue as fast as I could to Grand Central Station. And having lived and worked and lived in Connecticut and lived in Manhattan, I know this pretty well. So I got in the station, there are guys walking all over the place with machine guns. You know, military people with machine guns. You don't see that too often in Grand Central. So I said to one of the conductors, I said, you know, train to Connecticut. He pointed, and you know, if you've ever been there, that all the trains to Connecticut are right where I'm standing. And it was track 2021, and somehow I got lucky enough to find that picture. So I get down there, and the first thing I'm thinking is, when the trains come in, they come into the station. Here's where train, but when they go out, they're going that way. So I run all the way to the far end of the platform because I want to be on the first car that gets off Manhattan. Not only do I want to be in the first car, I want to be in the first car, I want to be in the first seat. So I'm thinking this whole thing through, and I get on the train, and I sit in this seat right here. So if anything should happen, I can get up, walk around right behind me. There's a door on the back where that emergency exit is. I can get out. That's how quickly I'm getting out of the damn train. So I'm sitting there minding my own business. The train is filling up and filling up and filling up with people. And I'm now in shock. I'm just quiet. I'm just minding my own business. And it's filling up. Directly across from me, these two women came in and sat down. And it was funny, you know, middle-aged, they were clearly the kind of women that ran like an insurance firm or a small law firm or a CPA firm. They just reeked of that. So they walked in, they sat down. Some guy comes in and sits down directly next to me. And I'm sitting there, I'm not saying a word to anybody. And out of nowhere, he reaches in his pocket and he goes, "Need a lifesaver?" I said, "You have no idea." Unbelievable. So that then led to me telling them the story that you've now heard, because they're all from Midtown. They don't know anybody who's been down in the Trade Center on that plane. They haven't heard it directly, so they've just heard what you all just heard. Okay, fine. The car fills up, it's now packed, and I do mean sardine packed. And where I'm sitting, right where that seat was, there's a guy right here on the other side standing. And so the conductor comes on and says, "Folks, this is the 212 whatever train, New Haven, whatever, you know, the milk train, all the stops. Doors close and you feel that initial bump of when the train takes off. And as soon as that bump hit, this guy right here collapsed to the floor." And I'm going, "Are you freaking kidding me? You know, what the hell else could happen? You know, what's this?" Turns out he was diabetic, and he had had whatever, sugar. So it's amazing what, and I learned what women carry in your purses. Because there was a CVS in that train. They got him revived really quickly. They got him back up, got him revived very quickly. And so I started to stand up to give him my seat. And the woman directly across the seat from me, it was funny, she reaches over, she grabs my arm forcefully, and she looks at me, she goes, "Honey, you've had a tough enough day as it is." And she looks at the guy next to me right here, and she goes, "I just know someone else will give up their seat." He's like, "Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am." So he got up, this guy sat down, and now we get to 190, what is it, 191st? First stop there, nobody gets on. Now we get out, we come out through the tunnel, daylight, we now cross over into the Bronx, we're off Manhattan. And I'm like, hallelujah, I'm now off Manhattan, I can walk to Connecticut if I have to. It's not that big a deal. So I use my cell phone, I call my sister, and I said, "Okay, you know, I'm on the train, I'll be there when I get there, yada, yada, yada." So she lives in Greenwich, so I get off the train in Greenwich, and I walk up Greenwich Avenue, and as I'm walking up the avenue, it's like a ghost town. It's just dead. So I walk up to her store is just up on the left here. She's outside waiting for me, and she comes running down and hugs me. I thought she was going to kill me. She hugged me, I'm like, "Lynn, you can let go now, you can let go." So we left her place, and then went up to her house. Her boyfriend met us, and I probably polished off about a bottle of Jack Daniels myself that night. But I woke up in the middle of the night in a fetal position crying. And all I had was the image of that and that. And I was like, this can't be for real. You know, so I got out of bed, I went downstairs, I turned the news on, and of course, you know, needless to say. So I also had the foresight somewhere during all this to call the company that I worked for and say, "Call the rental car company and get me a car." So they rented me a car. So the next day I left Greenwich because my ex-wife lived in Boston. So I drove home the next day, called the news people, and that's a whole other story. But that was how I lived in Beverly, Massachusetts. And so I'm home trying to get my life back in order, as we all did. And a couple of weeks, months go by, and my phone rings one day. And caller ID, still fairly new, but I look at my caller ID and it's WTC PD. And I'm going, World Trade Center Police Department, there is no World Trade Center. I pick up the phone, And the guy says, "Are you Robert Jenkins?" I said, "Yes, sir, I am." He said, "Mr. Jenkins, were you in the World Trade Center on 9/11? "Yes, sir, I was there." "We found your ID." "You did what?" "Yes, sir, we found your ID." I said, I asked him a few more questions, and I said, "So what happens when you call people?" And he said, "Well, sir, we have people cry, we have people hang up on us, we have people tell us to keep it, we have people say, send it to us." And when he explained what it was, I said, "Oh no, man, that's a piece of history. I want it." He said, "Okay, we'll send it to you." So a few days later, I got a forensic bag, and what they found will blow your mind. They found my ID card. Can you imagine the scope of that? 2 buildings came down. I was on the 39th floor. That was 90 some odd floors on top of me, came down that debris, and they found an ID card. That's the FBI forensics. So don't ever think that Big Brother isn't watching. They don't know what we're doing. If they can find that, they can find anything. And I'm not being funny about that. That is for fact. So they sent me that ID card. I've now got it. And I was going to donate it to the World Trade Center, to the museum. They wanted it. And I thought, no, I think I'd rather keep it in my possession. And I may still give it, but I'm still up in the air with it. So a year later, my older sister rented a place in Tuscany. And my family went over. She rented it for weeks. We all went over, and I'm pretty convinced that what they did was they were trying to get me away and away from it, just so not to be reminded. And I got to tell you, if you're ever going to go somewhere to try and forget about things, go to Tuscany. It works. So the night of 9/11, everybody had gone to bed. And, you know, good Italian wine, good Italian food, it was pretty spectacular. But I couldn't sleep. I was still pretty wrapped around the axle about this. So I went down and I'm watching the news. And I'm watching one of the documentaries. And if any of y'all have ever seen it, there was one that's pretty well known. 2 French brothers were in Manhattan, and they were doing a documentary on the New York City Fire Department, specifically the World Trade Center Fire Department. And so they were doing this documentary, and I happened to be watching that one. And so as I'm watching that, back to this. They came in the front of the building, and they walked around, and they came up the escalators to the top of the stair. Remember when I told you that's where I came out? That's exactly where I came out. Well, here they are with cameras, though. And they're walking around with cameras, so I can now see and hear everything. And, oh boy, it's right. I started to hear boom, 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 boom. I had no idea what it was. And if you ask me tonight if I could try and recall that memory, I have no idea. I can't pull it up if I try. But the moment I heard it, I literally started crying. It was bodies hitting the roof. People jumping. And it scared the bejesus out of me. And I just sat there and I cried like a baby. And my sister came downstairs, she heard me, and she sat next to me, she just put my head in her lap and she just held me. And we both just sat there and cried. It had to be one of the most emotional things that's happened to me to think, and psychologists will tell you what it's all about, I have no idea, but I can't pull that memory, it's gone. I can't tell you it happened, but when I heard it, I knew exactly what it was. And it was people jumping. So the other thing that's interesting, I did a job last year for a guy that just moved out here. He retired. He's a New York City detective, and he retired out here. And we did a job for him. We gutted his house and redid it. And he was telling me that there's the the World Trade Center Compensation Fund. And at first I wasn't interested at all in it. And he said, well, it's about people who were in the building and people that were getting sick and what have you. Kind of an unknown statistic is that more people have died since 9/11 of related causes than died on that day. The amount of cancer and the other things that have popped up, especially with all the first responders, they were breathing all that crap. And the number of them that have died and are sick right this moment is astronomical. And so when you think of the number of people that died on 9/11, double it, because that's what's died since then. And that's a horrific number. So when I say, in memory of those who lost, it's also not of those, but the people that lost somebody. There's a lot of families running around without mom, dad, aunts, uncles, what have you. Everybody lost that day. Oh, I love this quote by Eleanor Roosevelt. We gain strength and courage and confidence by every experience which you really stop to look fear in the face. And I hope we've all learned something. But the bottom line is people ask me why I do this. And it's, I don't think we should forget. I don't think we should forget. Thank you.